Postmaster General Louis DeJoy testifying before a Senate committee today, saying he supports mail-in voting.
I voted by mail for a number of years. The Postal Service will deliver every ballot and process every ballot in time that it receives.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Leanne Caldwell joining me now. Leanne, there was a lot going on this morning, pretty long testimony. What else did DeJoy have to say?
Yeah, it sure was, Allison. It was actually quite interesting. Another thing that lawmakers, especially Democrats, really wanted to get answers to was the allegations of political interference in the Postal Service, including in the governing board that works with DeJoy to implement policies called the Board of Governors. A former member of that Board of Governors named David Williams testified before a House committee or a group of House members yesterday. It wasn't a formal committee, but he said that there was politicization on the board, said that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin was extremely involved in the decision-making process of the Board of Governors. And so senators asked DeJoy about that today, and here's what he had to say.
Did you discuss those changes, or are there a potential impact on the November election with the president or anyone at the White House? And remind you, you're under oath.
I have never spoken to the president about the Postal Service other than to congratulate me when I accepted the position.
Prior to implementing the changes, did you discuss these changes or their impact on the election with any Trump campaign officials?
No, sir. These changes in our total analysis here and going forward, and remember, I'm one new person in the organization with the whole structure around me, an operating structure, an executive team around me that are involved in these decisions.
Now, the president does not appoint the Board of Governors, and the Board of Governors is the president does not appoint DeJoy, but the Board of Governors does, and the president does appoint who those Board of Governors are. Another thing that was brought up in this hearing, DeJoy really made the point that the changes he was trying to make was an attempt to get the Postal Service on fiscal grounds. Now, I want to back up just a minute, Allison, because the reason this is such a political issue right now, months ago, the president said that he was not supportive of additional funding for the Postal Service. I was being told 3 months ago by House lawmakers who predicted that Postal Service funding was going to be a major fight of the summer, especially in a pandemic and especially as the elections were coming up. And then this all got blown out of proportion as well, because the president said just a couple weeks ago that the reason he does not want funding for the Postal Service is because that would efficiently guarantee that mail-in ballots would be delivered and counted. So the part of the reason this entire Postal Service story is so political at this point is because of the president's public statements, and it has created a lot of skepticism, especially of Democrats up here, Allison.
Yeah, Leanne, so now that we have heard from DeJoy, how are lawmakers reacting? What are they saying about this first round of testimony?
Yeah, and it's political and partisan as well. The Democrats were, like I said, very skeptical of what DeJoy said. And Republicans, the chair of the committee, Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, his opening statement defended DeJoy, saying that he was a victim of character assassination and that all he was trying to do was to save the post office money. But this is just part one. On Monday, the House of Representatives committee is going to hear from DeJoy as well. Of course, that chamber is controlled by Democrats, so it's expected to be a lot more fiery. And we know that they were watching today's hearing, are going to follow up on a lot of unanswered questions that they had from today, Allison.
Leanne, I know one of the big issues with the Democrats is that they want DeJoy to permanently reverse any of the operational changes that he's already made. Any chance that will happen? What's he saying there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It depends on what the specific issue is. DeJoy said that he actually never cut overtime from employees, which is a major allegation from the postal unions on the removal of some of these post office boxes. He said that he didn't know about it until everyone else did, until it was in the media, that it was something that he didn't know was happening. And here's another thing of what DeJoy said when he was asked by the top Democrat on the committee, Gary Peters. Let's take a listen.
Well, we've heard about the sorters. You addressed that earlier. Will you be bringing back any mail sorting machines that have been removed since you've become Postmaster General? Will any of those come back?
There's no intention to do that. They're not needed, sir.
So you will not bring back any processors?
They're not needed, sir.
Yeah, so there's that answer. He says that he's not going to bring back those mail sorting machines, which is not the answer that Democrats wanted. So this is going to be an ongoing discussion. And like I said, we're going to hear a lot more about it on Monday, Allison.
Who knew we'd be talking this much about the post office? Leanne Caldwell on Capitol Hill, thank you so much.
Thank you.
This morning, 6 states plus Washington, D.C. filed a lawsuit against the U.S. Postal Service saying possible cutbacks in service violate federal law and the Constitution. NBC News Justice correspondent Pete Williams joins me now. Pete, what should we know about this suit?
So this brings to 20 plus D.C. the number of states who are suing the post office, and 2 of these major lawsuits, probably more yet to come. This latest one, filed by 6 states led by Pennsylvania, makes as these other lawsuits have, a statutory claim. They say that this plan violates a federal law that says that the post office can't do anything to deter the collection and distribution of mail nationwide. And secondly, they say it would violate the Constitution's provision that says you can't interfere with the vote based on age. And they say that because mostly older Americans, or many older Americans, will be voting by mail this time instead of going to the polls, that would constitute that kind of discrimination. Now, the other lawsuits have made similar constitutional claims. They say this abridges the right to vote. They say there's a provision in the Postal Service Code, the law governing the Postal Service, that says any kind of changes about mail delivery nationwide have to be approved by the Postal Regulatory Rate Commission. And we'll have to see now what happens to these lawsuits, given that the Postmaster General says, I'm not going to change anything, and I guarantee we'll deliver all the ballots. You know, I'm sure the government will argue, and they haven't formally responded to these yet, that these lawsuits are now moot, that none of these changes that the states feared are actually going to come to pass, and the lawsuits aren't necessary. The states, having already anticipated this, are saying, well, they're going to go ahead and press their claims just to make sure.
Pete, you said no official response from the federal government. Anything from the Postal Service, or are they just letting the testimony so far do the talking?
Absolutely the testimony. They've set up their own website, by the way, a new website to tell voters how this system should work. You know, I think you can argue whether these lawsuits were basically largely political or legal, trying to keep the pressure on the Postal Service. They certainly had the effect of doing that. But they've also, I think, all of this conversation about the huge number of mail-in ballots, the fact that the post office may or may not be up to the task, no matter how much it says it wants to do it right, have caused some states to re-examine how it is that mail ballots are delivered. You know, in some states, you have to put them in the mail. In some states, you can take them to a drop box specifically for mail-in ballots. And many states that have that provision are now saying, well, maybe we should do a lot more of that.
Pete Williams, thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
Same to you.
New questions today about Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin's role in Louis DeJoy's appointment. In the weeks before DeJoy got the job, Mnuchin met with Republican members of the Postal Service Board of Governors. Several people familiar with the meetings told NBC News. NBC News correspondent Heidi Przybyla joins me now. And Heidi, some big questions about conflict of interest here. What else do you know about the role that Mnuchin played in DeJoy's hiring?
Right, Allison. We confirmed that these meetings between Mnuchin and only the Republican members on that board took place in the run-up to DeJoy's appointment. Now, we don't know specifically what happened in them, other than, according to the sources that I talked to, that Mnuchin was adamant that the governors move efficiently on appointing a new Postmaster General, and that he wanted to be kept apprised of their deliberations, including any decision, before it was announced. Now, since these meetings were private, they were not subject to the Sunshine Act, which was created so that just such interactions between the executive branch and federal agencies would be transparent and open to the public. So the question here is, was this part of this broader agenda that we know was being carried out, frankly, since Trump came into office, targeting the Postal Service, Allison, that began with the creation of this task force in 2018 to study the Postal Service that was put under Mnuchin's control? After that, they came up with recommendations. Mnuchin then wrangled control of the money under the CARES Act that was supposed to go to the Postal Service. He objected to any of that money going without strings. So they converted it from a grant to a loan. And then Steve Mnuchin wrote a lot of conditions in there for that loan, which took months for the Postal Service to finally agree to. That happened after DeJoy came in. And these terms basically allow Treasury to look under the hood of these proprietary contracts that the Postal Service has that really raise questions among ethics watchdogs about the independence of this agency, which, unlike many federal agencies are already supposed to be independent, is really viewed as ultra independent because it has its own revenue stream that's separate from the appropriations process. It has its own board. It's supposed to operate like a board of trustees, Allison. And yet here you have the Treasury Secretary carrying out this influence campaign, which was one of the words that was used by individuals like David Williams, who's a former IG, who testified yesterday that even before these governors came in, they had to go over to Mnuchin and, in his words, kiss the ring.
Heidi, how about some of these more recent changes that we've seen at the post office, issues and questions about boxes and sorting machines? I know that the Postmaster General was asked about that today and about Mnuchin's involvement. What did he have to say there?
Right. So as Leon said previously, the boxes, DeJoy is saying that he had no knowledge of that. However, Dave Williams told us yesterday, the former IG, that the removal of these boxes was not something that was ever a plan for the Postal Service Board, as far as he was aware, but that this was something that Steve Mnuchin wanted done. Secondly, Dave Williams told us that with the decommissioning of the mail sorting machines, which can be drawn a direct link between that and a lot of the delays that we've seen, that the decommissioning is really not a cost-saving measure, which a lot of the folks who were listening on his testimony yesterday found shocking, because the entire premise for these changes, Allison, is that it's going to save taxpayers money. Well, what Dave Williams said, and he knows Postal better than almost anyone, is that the decommissioning of this equipment actually costs the taxpayers money, because that equipment is already there. Taking it out of service just makes things less efficient when we need to redirect mail based on natural disasters, hurricanes, etc.
Heidi, any official response from the Post Office, its Board of Governors, the Treasury Department? What are they saying about these meetings, about what NBC News is reporting?
Right. The Treasury Department did not directly deny that these meetings were taking place, Allison. We had been talking about this for a day or so. And then Steve Mnuchin issued a statement saying, I did ask the board to keep me apprised of these meetings, but that he had no direct role in recruiting DeJoy and didn't advocate for him. But there's still a lot of questions, Allison, about how he got the job, given that this search firm was obtained to conduct a nationwide search. And at the end of the day, the choice was a Trump donor, a major mega donor to President Trump with no experience in the Postal Service. So there remaining a lot of questions about how DeJoy wound up in that position. We were told yesterday by Dave Williams that there was some advocacy there by the Republican board members who themselves, there's questions about conflicts of interest, that they were the ones who were pushing DeJoy as Postmaster General and not this recruiting firm that was obtained.
Wow. Really unbelievable stuff there. Heidi Przybyla, thank you so much for coming on with us to share your reporting. Appreciate it.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here and click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.